Hi, I'm Mark. Welcome back to Foothill Paint Fabrication. Well, we're back on the 65 Malibu SS here, and today we're going to be doing the front suspension. So we have that upper and lower A-arm kit with the spindles, disc brakes, the whole deal. So we're going to be putting that on today and hopefully getting it back on its front tires so we can roll it around a little bit. So let's jump in here and I'll show you a few things that you're going to have to do on these kits to make it so it's more serviceable. Okay, I've got the lower control arm here, and like we spoke about when I did the mock-up to figure out the ride height and the bump stop locations and everything, it's very tight on this dimension right here, and it doesn't want to slide up into the frame too easily. So what I did was on the little nylon washer right here, I actually ground a little bit of a taper on there. I just removed a little bit of material just on the edge right here so I could get it started and then, you know, kind of hammer it up in there with a rubber mallet. So that is going to help. If yours is too tight, I'd recommend doing that because it's very frustrating trying to get this up in there when it's so tight. The other thing I did, you can see the tape here. These little washers, as soon as you hold it up there and you're about ready to try to fit it in, one falls off. So that's very frustrating. So I just got a little blue tape holding those on. Hopefully those will hold those in place and they won't fall off. As far as serviceability, these came with straight zerks that pointed straight up right here. And you know, really, once it's installed, you're never going to be able to grease it with those straight zerks on there. So I was looking for some 90s locally, and I could not find 90-degree zerks at this size. This is 1/8 inch pipe. So I actually, I found some 45s, and they actually look like they're going to work out better to get my clearance to get the grease gun fitting in there. So I kind of got this one pointed away a little bit, and then this one's kind of pointed right at the spring. So that should work out good. So let's move the camera back and see if we can get this thing up in here. Okay, I've got a rubber mallet here to help persuade this thing in. I got a couple of drifts, a ball peen hammer to drive everything in. So I've got it sitting on cardboard. I don't want to scratch up the powder coating, so I'm just going to kind of try to stand it up vertically. I've got the car high enough in the air so I can hopefully just kind of poke it straight up in there, get a little bit of angle, smack it with a hammer, and get that thing in there and get the bolts in. All right, now we don't have to worry about it falling. We could just go ahead and give it a couple of good smacks. Hopefully it'll go in. I think we got it. There we go. That was a lot easier than the other side. I did the other side first, and it was a bear. It did not want to go together. This side is way easier. All right, all we're going to do is get the nuts, lock washers and nuts on there. I'm going to leave them loose. Generally with rubber bushings, you want to leave everything loose until the car's at right height. You rolled it back and forth and everything's set where it wants. Then you tighten everything up so it kind of clamps them together at that spot. This one has these different bushings in here, so I don't think it matters, but just out of principle, I'm going to go ahead and tighten those up once the car is at right height. Okay, I got it all installed. I actually realized I put this bolt in backwards. I put it in this way and it needs to go in from the front so the drag link doesn't hit on the stud sticking out. But here you can see the grease zerks. So with this swung up like this, you can see if that was a straight zerk, there's no way you can get a grease gun up inside there. So you're definitely going to have to put a 45 or a 90 on these to make sure you can grease them. Okay, the next step is to get the spring compressed, and then we can swing the lower A-arm up underneath it. So the problem with this setup right here is my spring compressor, the threaded shaft is too short. It really needs to be another 6 inches long. This is the one I have, so I'm going to make it work. I should be grabbing it down here, and I'm only grabbing it 2/3 of the way down. I actually put the jack underneath here to try to push it up in there so I could grab at least one more coil. So I'm going to go ahead and crank this spring up. It's still not going to compress enough for me to swing that A-arm underneath, so we're going to have to do some redneck engineering here and get that spring up the rest of the way. So let me get this compressed, and I'll bring it back, and we'll get something rigged up so we can get this thing up inside the pocket. Okay, it looks like my spring compressor made a liar out of me. I was able to compress it just enough to get the A-arm swung up underneath it. Now, there's a lot of force on that thing. I've got it pulled pretty tight. It would have been ideal to grab a couple more coils, but like I said earlier, it's just not long enough. I'm going to have to get a longer one to do any other kind of work around on bigger cars. So it's in there. Now, I did rotate. There's a cushion in the bottom of this pocket, so I did rotate it so it lines up with the end of the spring, so it fits right in the pocket just like it's supposed to. It looks like it's just missing it by a little bit, but it's inside there, and that looks really good. Now, I did have to put a ratchet strap. You can see the ratchet strap right here. It's hooked on one of the coils. When I compressed this spring, it was kind of wonky out to the front here because it didn't go straight up. It was kind of, weird like a spring will do. So I just hooked the ratchet strap on a coil and hooked it on the frame back there, put up some clicks on it. It's got a fair amount of pressure on it, and just kind of pulled that spring straight, and then I was able to swing the A-arm up underneath it, get it set in the pocket, and get the jack underneath it. So, but this coil spring, spring compressor is maxed out right now, and if we put the spindle up here, we can't reach the ball joints to get them into the spindle. They just won't reach. So if I just start putting pressure on this jack, all it's going to do is lift the car off the jack stands because there's no engine or transmission, just not enough weight to compress this spring. So I'm going to have to pull the ratchet strap loose, and we're going to kind of redneck engineer this and hook the ratchet strap to the jack and then to the frame, and then kind of hold the frame from running away while we push on the jack, and we should be able to get this all put together. So let me set that up, and I'll bring you back. Okay, I've got the ratchet strap hooked to the axle on the jack, and then just up over the top underneath the A-arm here, and hooked to one of the A-arm bolts on top. And that just basically is holding the jack and the car together. Let's go ahead and put a little pump on this thing, see if we can't get this spindle up inside there. There we go. Looks good. Wood starting to break here. Line that up. Okay, we got it up there far enough. We can get these nuts started. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten up both these castle nuts, torque them, and be done with that. Get the cotter pins in and be done. And then the next step will be to get the tie rod arms on, bolted to the spindle with the caliper bracket and the splash shield. So let me get these tightened up and torqued and everything, and then I'll bring you back and we'll start getting some of those other parts on. Okay, we've got everything torqued, cotter pins in, we're good to go. So now it's time to put the caliper bracket on. So it goes right here, it goes in the back, and then the splash shield goes over the top of it. So we'll get this big 5/8 bolt in here first. And there are ears on here to bend over to lock that bolt in. Now, your spindle arms, you reuse your spindle arms off your old front suspension. So, but the thing is, on the 65, the holes right here, the bolts they supply and the holes that drilled in the spindle are 1/2 inch. Now, the holes in the spindle arms are like 7/16. So you have to drill these out. So drilling out just slightly bigger, 32nd on each side, the bit was grabbing a lot. So I actually switched over to a step bit that was 1/2 inch at the top. and it drilled a lot easier. So it might make it easier when you need to do it if you use a step bit instead of a standard bit. My 1/2-inch bit was super sharp, and it just kept trying to screw itself in, and it wasn't going so well. So, and these are actually thicker on one side. So this side is thicker than this side. So the longer bolt will go to that side. We'll go ahead and get these in. Get that lined up. We'll get the nuts on here and we'll get these torqued in. And then we can move forward with packing the wheel bearings, getting the rotors on, and getting the brake pads and the calipers on, and even hooking up the brake line. So let me get this all torqued up and tightened up, and then we'll get the wheel bearings packed and get the rotors on. Okay, I got the bearings packed, seals in. Let's get this rotor on. Now I had to take a little bit of emery cloth to the spindle to get it to the bearings to slide over. It says on the instructions you may need to do that. I just really lightly just went over it and the bearings slid on nice. So I'm going to go ahead and pack a little bit extra grease in here. I already packed that cavity pretty good, but this is something I like to do. We'll pump a little extra in there. I can see it starting to wad up there, so I know there's plenty in there. That looks pretty good right there. All right. Let's get the bearing in. Okay, let's stop right here. I can hear a few of you yelling at the screen. Mark, you big dummy, you put that rotor on backwards. That belongs on the other side because of the slots, and the drilling is facing forward at the top, not backwards. Now, technically, these rotors are on correctly because the cooling fins on the inside just splay straight out. They are not directional. They don't curve at all. They're just straight. So these rotors, it doesn't matter which way the drilling and the slots face. That's purely aesthetics. I've heard some people say, well, it ejects the brake dust faster and some other stuff, but that's all, you know, that's anecdotal. That's not scientific. So you could, in theory, put these facing either direction. I did, when I was all done, I was sitting back admiring all my hard work, and I realized, crap, I put those on backwards. I don't like the way it looks. And that was just because of the way it looks. So I put the car back in the air, and I swapped them side to side. So now at the top, the slot and the drilling face backwards. So when you're doing your car, or any car, if it has directional cooling fins on the inside, which they some do, you need to make sure that they're facing the correct direction. Otherwise, they won't work. They'll actually work worse than a straight cooling fin. So just keep that in mind. I did swap these back, and they're on the car facing the way I like the way they look. So let's get back to it. Yeah, it feels good. Okay, let me go ahead and get these preloaded, set real good, and get the cotter pin in. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean the rotors, and we'll get the calipers out, the pads, and we'll get this brake line on here. And that'll about do it. All we'll have to do is get the shocks and the sway bar on, and we can get a wheel on this thing. Okay, got the bearings set, everything's good. The hardest part of the whole deal was getting the dust caps on. I smacked on that thing for 10 minutes, I think, with a rubber mallet. Finally got it started, and then got it seated. So it's good to go. Took some lacquer thinner, cleaned off the rotor all the way around a couple of times. Make sure you know, any shipping oils or my dirty hands, handprints on there are all cleaned off. So it's time to put the calipers on. This kit comes with the pads already, so all we have to do is slide them on and get the bolts in place. And then we should be pretty good as far as getting this thing back on its tires today, I hope. We'll have to see. All right, got that one. Okay, let me get these tightened up. We'll get the brake line on, and then we can move forward. We're going to get the spring compressor off and start hooking up some of the steering linkage. Okay, calipers are on. Looks good. Now what we have to do is put the brake line on, And I'm not sure exactly which way this brake line should fit. It's a banjo fitting. So I'm thinking it should go up a little bit at an angle. So I'm going to put them on, you know, kind of hand tight or tighter than hand tight. And then once I get the wheel on and I turn the steering back and forth through its whole motion, lock to lock, then I'll be able to decide which way is the best way so it doesn't interfere with anything or rub or get bound up. So that's going to be the plan on that. Okay, that's just snug right there. So we go through the motion. Looks like it stays out of the way. I'm thinking it probably should go something like that right there. But we'll check once we get the wheel on. Okay, I got the shocks on both sides. I got everything done. Even got the tie rod ends connected and tightened. I went ahead and greased everything, so we're ready to go. All we have to do is put the sway bar back on. Now these A-arms come with their own heim joint and their own bushing, so all we have to do is get this hung, bolt those together, and then put some wheels on this thing and lower it to the ground. All right, let's get these connected to the lower A-arms. We will be just about done here. Okay, I got the sway bar in and everything's snugged up. It's not tight. I can't really adjust the sway bar until the engine's in and the weight of the car is down on it to do it properly. So it's just kind of snugged up. I ran into a couple of problems. One thing, I don't like the angle that this is coming back to the joint with. The original hole for the other sway bar connection is still here in this one, so I can actually revert back to that and use the original location, the factory location. But I'm gonna get the weight of the car on it and then see how it looks. The other problem is right here. This joint, heim joint, there's spacers on each side of it because these ears are welded so far apart. But the problem is it could use a whole nother spacer in there. So I'm going to talk to Dave and see if he'll you know, get the lathe going just for a few minutes and make me a couple of spacers so I can get those done right. So that's in there correctly so that thing's not bouncing around. So everything's good to go. I'm going to put some wheels, the front wheels back on it, and let's lower this thing to the ground finally. All right, 3 lug nuts should be enough to snug. Brakes look good up in there. All right, back on the ground. That's a good feeling right there. Looks good. It's riding really high because it needs to roll out to get the suspension to drop, but pretty happy the way it looks. We'll have to figure out the ride height once the engine and transmission's in. Everything's done. We may have to pull the springs out and cut them or put different springs in. Okay, all done. It's looking really good down inside there. Got the steering linkage all hooked up. Suspension, front suspension's all done. We are sitting on the bump stop right there. This car does not weigh much, and with nothing in it, it's not even enough weight to push it off that bump stop, so we'll have to figure out the right height later. Okay guys, that just about wraps up today's work. I got the car back on the ground, thankfully. So everything's set, still some adjustment to do. Gonna do a quickie front end alignment just with a tape measure to get it close enough to get it to the front end shop once we're all done, so we don't want to be scrubbing tires all the way there. Everything else worked out pretty well. The sway bar, I'm still not convinced about it, and it's sitting really high right now, but we don't have an engine, transmission hood, AC, any of that stuff on it. So once we get that loaded down, roll it around a little bit to let everything settle in, then we'll know what the ride height is, and then we'll determine what we need to do at that time. So it looks like it's a little high to me, so we may have to pull those springs out and cut, a coil out or half a coil or something, or look at some different springs. But other than that, everything went really well. The suspension is super tight. This thing's gonna corner really, really well. Happy the way it came out. Thanks for joining me here at Foothill Paint Fabrication. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already, and mash that bell icon so you get notifications every time I release a new video. We'll see you on the next one.